Hello. Um, I'm Astro, and I'm a reader, and I'm a filmmaker, and a film enjoyer. And today I want to talk about everything I read and everything I watched in May. So this month I took a little social media break for 3 weeks, and that allowed me to read much more books than I usually read and watch so many movies. And it was really great, and I'm really hoping that I can keep up with this pace during the upcoming months of summer, because it was really enjoyable to see and read so much. And yeah, let's get into it. So during this month, I ended up reading 3 books and watching 10 films. And an important note before I start talking about my books, I'm going to talk about books and then films, because to understand my film choices, you have to know what I read this month. Most of the stuff that I read is connected to my research paper, which I'm supposed to do to finish high school. And I will be writing it about dissociative feminism, so like nihilism in women and everything that's happening in the world right now and all that. And I went to my literature teacher, and he recommended me a few reads. And the first thing he said to read was Notes from the Underground by Fyodor Mikhailovich Dostoevsky. And this was a great read. I loved it. At first, my teacher tried to recommend me a good translation, but I am a native speaker, so I can read it in the original, which is really cool. I feel very fancy about it. This book is a novella in the style of a memoir of this unnamed narrator who is a retired worker in Russia, and he's really going through a low point in his life, and he's blaming everybody but himself for the faults in his life. In my opinion, this book was like a guide on how to completely mess up your life. And it was really interesting to see, because I think we have all been the man from the underground at one point in our lives. Because, just like a low point where everything is going just badly and you don't know what to do, and you're so self-absorbed in it that you don't understand really what went wrong, and people tend to blame others in such cases. But here we can see that the narrator is actually at fault, that he's just pushing everything to be even worse. Like, whenever he gets the opportunity to improve, he doesn't take it, he just rejects it fully, and usually makes a decision that makes the situation even worse. And I think there is this French saying, I saw like a Wikipedia article about it, the calling of the void. That's like the urge to mess up your life when everything is going great. And I feel like the calling of the void is a very overarching theme in the literature that I was reading this month. He rejects any opportunities that are given to him, any slight way out of his situation, he doesn't accept it. And it was really interesting to see like his troubles from a different perspective as the reader. It was just absolutely amazing to see this worldview of how he blames humanity so much, and how he's sort of delusional. He is sort of delusional. He wants to fight this police officer, and he dreams about it for months, how he's gonna approach him and how he's gonna get himself a fancy coat so he can look better when he slaps him. And then when they finally meet, when he just passes him by, when the narrator passes by the police officer, he doesn't end up doing anything. He's just And he's so delusional, he's so self-absorbed that even small things, he blows them out of proportion. Once again, the police thing, I don't even remember why it started. I think the narrator thought that there was some sort of show of disrespect towards him from the police officer, and he just blew it out of proportion so much. Like, he had this elaborate plan, again, about the clothing and the place, and he was dreaming about it for months. And it was so, in the end, the police officer didn't even know that this thing had happened because it was such a tiny, small moment. And it just really shows how obscured a person's world can be when they are just sitting in this like echo chamber and sitting in this bell jar, sitting under a bell jar, which is spoiler of the next book that I read. Yeah, I annotate all of my books, so I will probably read out a quote right now. Okay, so the page that I chose is 38 and 39 for the readout. There's a lot of notes, and I wrote a little quote, self-sabotage. And this is what I'm going to read out. So this might be a little slow because I'm translating it from Russian because I read it in Russian. Is that not why he loves destruction and chaos, and unarguably he does love it from time to time, that he is afraid of reaching his goal and achieving all his wants? Maybe he just likes to look at it from afar, but not up close. Maybe he only likes to look at it, not to live in it. Imagining it as a animal domestique. And that translates to domestic animal, so pet. And yeah, and I wrote above it, self-sabotage, which is exactly what this man is doing in the book. He is just sabotaging himself over and over again. And it's so weird to me because not weird, it's very human, it's very understandable, but it's a common thing a lot of people do, and it's very unfortunate, and I do too. He knows what to do. He understands all of these faults in humanity. He understands this passage about self-sabotage. He understands the human emotions, everything. But he can't apply it to himself. He's stepping on his own rakes all the time. Like, falling into his own traps. And that's a talk on irrationality and rationality. And after I was discussing this book with my literature teacher, I talked about, like, yeah, this is a really interesting perspective compared to Camus. Like, Camus, The Stranger, it's, in my opinion, much more rational, but that's just the way of absurdism. This focuses much more on the irrationality, and that human nature is very spontaneous, it's very complex. And of course, you can't just, he knows the rules, he knows the method, he knows how to live, but he doesn't follow it because he's just not feeling it. And maybe he doesn't understand that he needs to apply these rules that he has. And it's very human. So this book, I feel like that's why it was so easy to read for me, because it was just very close to heart and very human, and a very human story. Yeah. And I gave it a 4 out of 5 on Goodreads, I think. No, a 4.5. A 4.5. Yeah, it was good. It was really good. The next thing was The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath. And I picked this up because I read Camus, and then I read Dostoevsky, and I really wanted to get a female perspective on existentialism and nihilism. And I thought Sylvia was a great place to start. This book, I have quite a lot to say about it. The first half had me so hooked. I read this whole thing. It's 240 pages in my edition. And I read the first half in like 2 days. And it was amazing. Like, I don't think I've ever felt so seen by a book. It was absolutely lovely. Her metaphors, her writing style, her choices of words, it's beautiful. It's wow. I was in shock. I was underlining so much. I was really happy that I got to see the fig tree metaphor that everybody was raving about on social media. I got to see it in full, and I got to know its context, and I think it's absolutely beautiful. And for those who don't know, I saw my life branching out before me like the green fig tree in the story. From the tip of every branch, like a fat purple fig, a wonderful future beckoned and winked. One fig was a husband and a happy home and children. And another fig was a famous poet. Another fig was a brilliant professor. And another fig was E.G., the amazing editor. And another fig was Europe and Africa and South America. And another fig was Constantine and Socrates and Attila and a pack of other lovers with queer names and offbeat professions. And another fig was an Olympic lady crew champion. And beyond and above these figs were so many more figs I couldn't quite make out. I saw myself sitting in the crotch of this fig tree, starving to death, just because I couldn't make up my mind which of the figs I would choose. I wanted each and every one of them, but choosing one meant losing all the rest. And as I sat there, unable to decide, the figs began to wrinkle and go black, and one by one, they plopped to the ground at my feet. Yeah, it's really beautiful. I feel like this is the perfect teenage girl read in this sense, because the narrator is 19, and it's really, really lovely, really like about girlhood and just figuring stuff out and not knowing what's the next step and feeling lost and upset with what's going on. However, my impression of the book was ruined by the second half, because although the narrator obviously has issues, she's mentally unwell, rather seriously, and she talks about it a lot and how she's just lost, doesn't know what to do, etc. But then in the second half of the book, she very drastically changes for the worse. And what kind of surprised me was how she starts graphically describing all the ways that she tries to kill herself. Which is, I'm not usually a sensitive reader. I'm usually okay with everything. But I feel like this probably affected me so much because I was so in the book. I was really feeling it the first half. And I took it so close to heart that the second part was just like, oh, okay, let's take a step back. And she just starts very graphically talking about it, about blades, about pills, about everything. And okay, it's a natural step. I was expecting that, of course, with the way that the character was behaving. But then she gets put into a mental institution, which is, again, fine, respectable. And she just kind of becomes very mean and very rude and just a bitch. And the change was way too sudden for me, because suddenly she just starts expressing these extremely homophobic and racist views, which is, again, this was written in the 60s. It's okay, we understand the context of the book. But I would get it if this was like spread throughout the book and you could just understand, like, yeah, okay, these are the beliefs of the author because it was a certain time and it was acceptable, etc., etc. But this was just like sprinkled on in two parts randomly. Like, the racist part is like 2 paragraphs, but it's very like intense for some reason. I'm like, okay, girl, I did not know why did you have to put that in there, but okay. And then the homophobia part is just used to get rid of this other character. I won't say which one and what happened to her because that's spoilers. But yeah, it's just kind of like a moving point to detach the main character from the side character. So then the side character can later just, they could get rid of her. And yeah, that also took me by surprise. The ending was nice. I liked the way they ended it, but honestly, the way that the character acts in the end, it's very teenage girl. It's very teenage girl just being mean and obsessed with certain things. Like she was obsessed with losing her virginity in the second part of the book. But it just kind of ruined the whole read for me. I don't know. But yeah, purity and virginity and relationships are such a big theme. Like I have so many quotes underlined in here and little remarks saying purity, feeling of cleanliness. She's just really obsessed with it in the first part, and it kind of like manifests with like sex in the second part. But in the first part, she talks a lot about like these Christian values of her mother, and then she talks a lot about like going to a bath to cleanse herself to feel pure, doing all sorts of stuff to like feel pure. It's interesting. It's really interesting. Yeah, it was a good read. I gave it a 4-star. I gave it a 4-star. I gave it a lower rating than Notes from the Underground, but it was still good. I really liked it, and I want to read more of Sylvia, but I'll talk about that a little bit later. It's really hot in my room because I don't have the air conditioner on because it makes a lot of noise when recording. I'm so sweaty, like my back is like fully wet, I think, because it's been so hot lately in here. Finishing with my really happy, optimistic book choices. The last thing that I read was Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep by... what was his name? Oh Lord, I forgot his name. I'm so sorry. I know that his last name is Dick. Philip K. Dick. That's it. Philip K. Dick. And this is the slow transition into my watching list, because this was a class reading and it later on was made into a film, which is Blade Runner. Everybody knows Blade Runner. I really enjoyed this, even though it was a class reading, and I'm not usually the biggest fan of assigned readings, because they're usually like a little bit strange. I love my teacher, but I don't love his choice of in-class reading, unfortunately. This was just a really interesting exploration, which is very valid with the current day reality with AI and everything. This was talking about society where, due to nuclear war, people had to move to colonies in outer space, and it's mostly Mars, but other planets too, I think. And on those colonies, they have androids, or in the film they later called them replicants, and they are slaves to humans. But these androids are escaping and going back to Earth, where they are not permitted. So there are the Blade Runners, which are supposed to retire them. And the main difference between androids and humans is emotion. That androids don't feel emotion, and there's this like a really interesting test about their emotional response that allows Blade Runners to understand whether this being is a human or an android. And it's really interesting. It's really great. All the characters have personal stories, and the androids have like really interesting jobs. Like, there aren't just androids who are like wandering around. One of them is an opera singer, the other is a police officer. They have a whole system, and it's just super, super cool. It's really great. I loved it, and I'm quite the big fan of sci-fi, actually. I don't read it as much anymore, but I used to read it a lot when I was younger. And yeah, I enjoyed the USSR writers of sci-fi. I think they were really ahead of their times with their inventions. It was really cool. But yeah, I don't feel like I have much more to say about it, because if I were, that would be spoilers, unfortunately. But this book is really action-packed. Like, there's a lot happening in every chapter, but at the same time, it doesn't feel like too much. And just the exploration of differences between humans and androids is really interesting. I love it. It's really good. I gave it a 4-star. So, that's it with the books. And now I'm gonna open up my laptop so I can see my letterboxd and talk about everything that I saw this month. 10 films, which was a lot for me. I usually don't watch as much. First thing that I watched this month was a rewatch, and it was Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. I feel like all the stuff that I watched this month can be categorized into like 3 areas: sad, queer, French. Possibly you can also add sci-fi in there, or like mystical realism. That could also work. It's a 4th category. And somewhere, some of these films, they like intertwine. I rewatched this, my second watching, or maybe even third. I watched it when I was like really, really younger, but I barely remembered it. And then I watched it in November, and then I watched it now at the beginning of May. Not beginning, it was like middle. I think it was like the 15th or something. And it's a tough movie. It's a beautiful, beautiful, but it's an extremely tough movie. The poem, I'm obsessed with the poem. Of course I am. Of course I am obsessed with the poem, but it's amazing. I'm thinking of getting it tattooed on me, possibly somewhere in the future, if I don't change my mind about it. But just the idea of like traveling through one's memory and reliving it and like just holding on, it's absolutely beautiful, very human, very relatable, and just, yeah, I cried so much. I don't think I cried on my first watching of it, but I definitely cried on my second one. After that, I went on Reddit and I searched up what movies are similar to Eternal Sunshine, and I found this French film from 1968, and it's called Je t'aime, je t'aime. I love you, I love you. It's, oh my god, it's amazing. It's about this man who attempts suicide, and then scientists recruit him to try out their new time travel technology, and they want to send him 1 minute, exactly a year back, when his dead wife was still alive. And he goes back, but he gets stuck, and he's going through this endless loop of reliving his memories, and it's crazy. It's hard to understand. First of all, because I watched it in French with subtitles, and I had to really, really focus on what was going on. That's number 1. And number 2, the narrative is very confusing. You don't really understand the story at first because he's just jumping back and forth through memories. They aren't chronological. They keep repeating. But it's shot very beautifully. The story is extremely human. The characters aren't very likable. The characters aren't the best. But their story is extremely beautiful. And this is what I love about French cinema that talks about love. French cinema talks about love. It doesn't put like rose-colored glasses on it, which I love. It shows it in full toxicity. It shows it in full unhealthiness, but it does it beautifully and in a very human way. I feel like I keep saying in a human way, but that's the best way I can describe everything that I've read and watched. I really liked it. It was cool. I gave it a 5-star. I took a little break because it was getting way too hot and my phone was running out of battery. But we're back now. So, the next thing that I watched was Blade Runner. And we watched it because, once again, do androids dream of electric sheep was the basis for Blade Runner, and our teacher gave us some relaxed time, and we watched it in class. The first Blade Runner, the old one, I rated it at 2 stars. I really hated it. And it was because the characters were not worked through, I guess. that was my main issue. The book was so intricate, it was so personal, the stories were so amazing, but the film, it was just an action-packed, beautiful picture. There wasn't any character development. If you look at the main character, Deckard, you can't imagine him doing anything outside of the film because he has no personality. And what I found out is that apparently the film was too long, so they had to cut some character development. But still, beautiful picture, obviously a classic. However, not the biggest fan. And then I watched Blade Runner 2049, which is the sequel, and I loved it. I gave it a 5 stars. It was beautiful. I'm not usually the biggest fan of Ryan Gosling, but he was so good as an android, as a replicant, as an android. He just has that vibe to him that allows him to play a fake, I guess. This was a much more personal story. Like, you really root for the characters. You can imagine them doing something outside of the plot of the movie. What do they do in free time, etc. And it was really great. And once again, it explored the theme of the real versus the imagined, and all the robots and how this new world functions. It was really good. Super great. Next, I watched Portrait of a Lady on Fire. And it was once again something that I didn't really enjoy that much. Very unfortunately, this is one of the favorite films of my best friend, and I watched it because of him. And also, it's a French film, and I was like, okay, I'm going to just continue my French film streak, because the French are just really good at making films for whatever reason. And Portrait of a Lady on Fire was unfortunately a bit too slow for me, I guess. I'm usually a fan of slower films and not so action-packed movies, but for whatever reason this felt way too dragged out for me. Although it was beautiful, the picture, the dialogues, the story, like, in theory this movie sounds perfect for me. It's about the artist and the muse and this very complex forbidden love, but on practice it just wasn't for me, unfortunately. I got through the first hour, and then the second hour I started like skipping it a little bit, which I'm not really proud of, but it just wasn't my thing, unfortunately. The ending was really good. I really like how they wrapped it all up. It was great. But overall, not the best for me, personally. Next, I really want to watch Dune, because I haven't yet. And I'm not the biggest fan of Chalamet, so I decided to watch some of his older works to, get used to him. And I watched Beautiful Boy, and it was so amazing. It was just heartbreaking. I started crying on the 20th minute of the movie, I think, and I cried until the end. I was constantly stopping it just to cry and take a tiny break and then continue watching it. But I don't know how accurate is the addiction portrayed, because, I'm not, I haven't lived through this, and I haven't had any close people who lived through this type of addiction. But the relationship with his parents and this like gifted kid that they had such high hopes for and they were putting so much effort into, and then he just kind of, this one thing, it pushes him and he just starts going on this path and like disappointing everybody, and he's so sorry for it, but he can't help it. Oh my god, that just destroyed me, and it was so amazing. And this film really really made me want to just come up to my dad and like hug him, and I think that was amazing that this evoked such an emotion. And I really want to read the book. I think there's a book for this. I think this is based on a book, so we're going to read that. And then next was again a work of Chalamet's, Call Me By Your Name, which is, I gave it a 3.5. We're not going to talk about their age gap, because the story is obviously, it's not the best in that sense, but the soundtrack, I've had it on repeat for 4 days now. The soundtrack is beautiful. Oh, also about Beautiful Boy. A lot of people were complaining about the music choices, that they were like poorly timed and out of place. I thought it was amazing. I really liked that the music came on at such weird points in the story, and it timed really well with the times I cried, so it was perfect. But yeah, Call Me By Your Name has such beautiful music and such a beautiful image, and the scenery is lovely. The way they dress them, it's also amazing. The story, yes, the story sucks. We don't like a 17-year-old and a 24-year-old in a relationship, but it's a must watch. I feel like everybody should watch it. It's just, like a modern classic. Next thing I watched was another weird age gap movie, and that was Lost in Translation. I hated it. I gave it a 3-star. And I hated it because the same issue with Blade Runner, I did not root for the characters. I didn't get them. They felt bland. The movie was really racist towards Japanese culture, in my opinion, because they just kept joking about, like, oh, Japanese people can't speak English. Wow, girl, you're in a different country. Of course, people are probably not going to speak your native language. Additionally, you only know one language. So, get over it, I guess. And the characters didn't go through any transformation from what I thought, Like, yeah, there is a little bit of a change, but it's not what a transformation for a character is supposed to be. They had this really good, starting point for the character that is played by Scarlett Johansson. Scarlett Johansson? Yeah. I can't even remember the name of the character. She was so bland. She was so boring. But the setup is really good, because she is this very human story about being lost after college, not knowing what to do, not knowing her place, and they just didn't really do anything with it. They just made them run through Tokyo and drink and sing karaoke. And I was not a fan of that. Sorry. The next thing that I watched was Marriage Story. It was amazing. I gave it 4 stars. I am a big fan of La La Land. La La Land is in my top 4 on Letterboxd. And I feel like if Noah, the director, if he put a little bit more songs in there, it could have been like a really messed up version of La La Land. Adam Driver was amazing. Scarlett Johansson was also amazing in this. Their acting was just top notch. All the crying, all the arguing, beautiful. And just how it started in love and how it ended in love. It's beautiful, beautiful story. Again, very human. I've been watching a lot of human stuff. It's great. I didn't cry during this one, but I really felt it, and I'm very happy about that. And then the last thing that I watched was The Lobster, and The Lobster was about... I realized that I didn't really talk about the films, the plot of the films. I was just giving opinions. But The Lobster is about this society where you have to be paired up with a partner, and if you are not paired up, you are turned into an animal and released into the wilderness. Yeah, that's like a very short, brief summary. The Lobster was a really weird watch, but in the best way possible. This is exactly the amount of weird that I love in a movie. Like when it's really messed up and you don't understand what's going on, but it's beautiful. Like the image is beautiful and it's interesting, so perfectly weird for me. Really cool way to build a society, the loners and the companionship society, and both hate each other. Like the loners don't accept any type of companionship, and companionship doesn't accept any type of loneliness, and they're heavily punished in both. And it's super cool. And being able, the fact that people are matched on like similar characteristics, that's interesting. And I mean, it's kind of just a really messed up version of our world and how we are matched on similar characteristics with other people. And I also really like that you can choose your own animal. I'd want to know what animal would my friends would want to be turned into if they don't find a partner. That's really cool. Yeah. That's it for my books and for my films. It was a great month, very productive in that sense. And during the summer, I really want to read more of Sylvia Plath. I really want to read her unabridged diaries. I really want to read her poetry. I'm a big fan of poetry. I read poetry myself. And I feel like, I don't know, I really liked her, even though that the bell jar did end up kind of sucking a little bit. Still feel like Sylvia would be like a really good author for me to read right now. And for more perspective of existentialism from women, I really want to read Simone de Beauvoir, which I couldn't find anywhere in where I live, but I currently have a friend in Athens, and I asked him to hunt down a little bit of Simone for me. And also my literature teacher said he has a copy that I can borrow, which is cool. And I want to read The Second Sex. I want to read Woman Destroyed, I think that's what it's called. And I want to read her letters with Sartre. Sartre is also on my to-be-read list. He's somewhere up there. Nausea. I really want to read Nausea. It's apparently also relevant to my research paper with its like philosophical views. Yes. And for movies, I want to watch classics, because I will be taking a short film course in Berlin over the summer, and I feel like I gotta know my basics, so I want to, watch The Godfather and Casablanca and Citizen Kane, all of that stuff. And plus, I want to watch a lot more French films, because not only am I supposed to, be leveling up my language skills in French, because they're currently not the best, but also I just really love the way that French people make film. The French are really great at it, especially the New Wave movement, of course. It's amazing. And yeah, I'm definitely also gonna read a few summer reads. Like, I am a big fan of Talented Mr. Ripley, and I really want to read the book that it is based on, so we'll see about that. And yeah, I feel like that's probably it. That's all I have to say. I was talking for quite the while. Follow me on Letterboxd and on Goodreads, and stay tuned for more reviews. Bye bye!